Something that I really love about art, that I always love about art, is that it has this really crazy ability to tell stories and evoke emotions that lack scale in any regard. And it's almost like witchcraft, the way art can do this. A great artist could tell a story about somebody losing a pen or, accidentally spilling some milk and make it more emotional than anything you've ever read. And I think that this isn't just an accident. This isn't just, a great writer is always going to be a great writer. There's an element of truth to that, right? I think that, if you gave Ernest Hemingway a story about somebody spilling milk, he could probably make you cry in that story much better than I could make you cry in a story about a tragic death or something like that, Because a great writer can do that. I am a believer in that. I think a great writer could take a bad premise and make it better than a bad writer. Not that I think I'm a terrible writer, but a mediocre writer. I'm no Hemingway, and with a good premise. I do think that. However, I think that to end the conversation there, as so many usually do, would be a disservice to what art can really do. I think that this is something I've heard a lot. You guys know, oh my God, Brandon Sanderson, I believe is his name, and he does lectures on writing at BYU. Is that it? BYU, Brigham Young? Is that the name of the university? The Mormon guys. Is it the Mormon guys? Guys, I don't know anything about Christianity. Is Mormon Christian? Yeah, Mormon's Christian, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, before I embarrass myself further, he has these lectures, right? And in these lectures, he says that, a good writer can take a bad premise and make a great story out of it, right? Basically, exactly what I just said. He has a whole different analogy about Pokemon, but we'll stick with the Ernest Hemingway analogy, right? Because it makes sense. I think that when he's talking about this, I think he sort of misses, he almost gets halfway to a really great conclusion. And obviously, this isn't me saying that Brandon Sanderson doesn't go far enough. He's trying to teach a class, not philosophize about what writing is. But I think that within him saying this thing that is true, or at least seems true, there's a great deal of examples to back up it being true. I think that he could go a little deeper and actually find something really profound about art, and that's that art is really great at lacking in scale, right? Something that I have always found so interesting about art is this ability to make things that are super personal extremely universal. Let me put it like this. Have you guys ever watched a war movie? A really great war movie? A war movie that really makes you feel something, right? Isn't that a little weird? If you and your friends, let's say you and a friend are sitting down on a curb somewhere, something bad maybe just happened, I don't know, why else would you be sitting on a curb? I feel like sitting on a curb is never a good omen, but let's say you're sitting on a curb, it's just an average day, right? You guys are talking about, you're bonding over the fact that you both lost somebody in your life to addiction. That's going to be a really emotional conversation. That's going to be a conversation that can evoke emotions really easily. I mean, the bridge from you guys starting that conversation to having an extremely touching moment is probably not a very long bridge. It's a really simple and short bridge, actually, because it's something you can both relate to, Now, if you and your friend were sitting on this curb having a conversation about the devastation of war, it's probably going to be a pretty removed conversation, right? You're not going to be assuming that neither you or your friend or anybody close to you has gone to war and maybe didn't end so well. Assuming that, this conversation is going to be a fairly detached one. Maybe you'll start talking about something a little more political than personal. Maybe it won't go as far into the emotional route, and we'll kind of end up more in the route of, the political implications of this. I don't think that's a stretch. I think that happens a lot with conversations of that regard. I know in my own life they do, for sure. That makes sense. What I just said makes complete sense, obviously. On the one hand, you've experienced this thing, you've lost somebody in your life to addiction. Of course that's going to make you more emotional than war, this thing you've never seen in your life, this thing you've only heard about. Why is it then that a movie about war, despite the fact that you have no relation to this, despite the fact that this is a complete and utter foreign entity to your life, war, especially, I know that people not just from America watch this, but especially if you are from America, you have never seen war the way that somebody from, even Europe has. I mean, especially if you're in the global south or the Middle East regions, especially, like, you've seen a ton more direct conflict. But like in America, in the Western world, like, war has never really happened in hundreds of years on American soil. You cannot relate to this in any way. It's weird that this war movie could make you feel something like that, right? Once again, the conclusion that I feel like a lot of people come to there is just like, that's what a good director can do. And to an extent, again, I will say I think that's true, but there's this repeated pattern, obviously, here at this point, that art as a concept in general is able to make you feel emotions that you cannot directly relate to, because it's able to make things lack scale. 100%. I think that is one of the best abilities in art. So often, especially, this is something that has been happening in popular movies, I think, for a minute now. There's like this really big temptation to make everything a world-ending movie. I'm going to talk about the Marvel movies in specific, right? Because ever since Avengers Endgame, it feels like every Marvel movie, the world needs to be ending. It's not, and I could see why the Marvel execs are worried about having a movie where the world isn't ending. You just had this movie that did so well, where the world is ending. Yeah, you gotta keep upping the stakes. People aren't going to be interested. And I think this is a great mistake, actually. I think this is a really big mistake on the part of the creatives, or probably more accurately, the people who are the execs or whatever. I don't really know how the Marvel Studios corporate ladder works, to be honest with you guys, but I think it's a misnomer, a miscalculation that comes out of a misunderstanding that art has an ability to lack scale. Once again, I'm going to go into another example here, but like, you could tell a story about Spider-Man just kind of failing on a mission, right? He maybe a building collapses when it wasn't supposed to, or something like that. And that can be way more emotional, way more touching than a movie about the world ending. And that's how art works. It lacks scale in the lessons it teaches, it lacks scale in the emotion that it evokes. I think that, once again, I think this in itself is a really important lesson for a lot of for artists to kind of take to mind, right? Because I think it should be used as a tool in your tool belt to tell more honest stories, to paint more honest things, to make songs that are more personal to you. Because when you have a temptation to make something, this kind of goes back to the conversation of the tortured artist we were having a couple days ago. When you have this temptation to make everything dark and sad and complex, it becomes dishonest, and you can execute a story that touches people way more if it's a little more honest. I think, this is my own personal opinion now, right? But so I think it lacking scale is important. It's an important thing to note. Why though is this, right? This is the part of the conversation. Like, I think it's a fairly, as much as like, I just went through 3 pretty similar examples there, and I've spent probably half this video's runtime by now going into this whole thing that art can lack scale, can defy scale, rather, and tell stories that evoke great emotion no matter what they're about. As far as that's a fairly fine observation, right? That's not even my own theory. That's just an observation that art has this ability. Why, though? I think this is the much more interesting part of this conversation. Why can art do that? Because, like, that doesn't, again, it's so unintuitive. Back to the idea of you and your friend having a conversation on the curb. Why is it that a movie like that can make you feel things that you've never experienced, that you are so detached from? Why? I think I've thought about this a good amount because I found it super interesting. Especially, I found it interesting in last summer, right? When looking at like the songs of the summer, there was Good Luck Babe by Chappell Roan, Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter, and there was Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar, right? There were obviously more, but I'm going to use these 3 as an example because I remember listening to these and being like, this is really interesting. Because when you think about like songs of the summer, usually it's a fairly typical love song, right? Like Summer of '69 or something like that. Like, these are songs that are, is that the name of the song? Summer of '69, is that the name of the song? I don't know. But you guys know what I'm talking about. Like, a lot of songs of the summer, you typically have an association to that with being something that's very just like commercial, marketable, not really deep in subject matter, right? And I'm not going to sit here and say that I think that any of these songs that were big last summer were like the epitome of being thesis essays, you know what I mean? But I was interested because I was like, why these three? You know, clearly there's some aspects that go into this that are removed from this conversation, right? They're catchy songs. They're all big artists. I mean, Chappell Roan was up and coming. She kind of took the whole internet angle last summer, and that exploded for her, right? Amazing artist, huge fan. Chappell, if you're watching, I would love to have you on the show. I don't have guests, but you know, if you just want to be my replacement, that'd be great. Finally retire. I think I'd like that angle. But these songs were fairly out there. I mean, Espresso, I guess, is a little bit more normal, but Not Like Us is something that is obviously very personal to Kendrick. I mean, he gives a history lesson halfway through the song about exploitation of culture, right? And, I mean, obviously, first half, it's a little bit more historical in a direct sense, but he brings that to a modern day about exploiting culture. And I mean, that's something that, like, not trying to be the guy who's, like, doing a whole analysis of Not Like Us. I mean, how many white guys have done that already? But that's something as a white person that I am not in direct contact with ever, right? And same thing with Good Luck Babe, right? The song is about having a friend who's clearly not coming into their own identity, right? Or I think a little bit more than a friend based on what's inferred by the song, at least, right? Like, these are things that, I mean, I'm not a lesbian. I can't, you know, directly correlate with that. Same thing with Not Like Us. I'm a white guy. I can't directly look at my own life and find one-to-one examples. But the only conclusion I could come to last summer, and perhaps this is even one that's a little bit discrediting to these songs, to these artists, but the only conclusion I could really come to was that the songs themselves are only relatable as abstractions to general audiences, right? Like, Good Luck Babe. I as a person might not have ever gone through having a friend who isn't accepting their queer identity, right? But we can all relate to the idea of having somebody in our lives who we feel isn't accepting their true self because they're worried about the judgment of others or because they're in denial. We can all relate to that, right? When it comes to a song like Not Like Us, I mean, we can all relate to the idea of just having, in general, somebody we don't like. That could be a part of it. I think that there's an argument, too, that we can all relate to this idea of somebody being in a group, like a different group than the one you're in. Maybe it's even just like somebody's in a different social circle, and you feel they're kind of, you know, ripping your style a little bit. Obviously, that's something that is these are abstractions that, as I said, maybe are even a little bit discrediting to the songs themselves, right? I think there's an argument to that, right? But that's maybe an idea on why so many people can relate to these things, despite the fact that they don't come into direct contact with them. A lot of people are going to say, no, that's just because the songs are catchy. And I mean, listen, there's a huge chance that you're probably 100% right about that. Because the subject matter of songs is obviously not what makes them go places, right? I'm somebody who's so into this stuff, and I read every lyric, and I, you know, really like to think about these things. So I do understand why I probably have a perspective on this that is extremely jaded. And a lot of consumers are just turning on the radio and going like, okay, this song is really catchy, this song's great. I mean, I know like my parents love the song Good Luck Babe and Pink Pony Club, and that's, obviously they don't know 100% what these songs are about when they listen to them. Maybe Pink Pony Club, but either way. I think that could be the answer, though. I think that there is a case to be made that the reason that art has this ability to transcend scale and make the personal so universal is because of that all art is merely abstractions of emotions put into things. I also don't like that, though, because just as I said that, like my example of these songs, I felt it was a little reductive, right? I think that can be said for like all art. I think that can be. Where like if you were to say this only appeals to people because it has a certain emotion to it, right? Go back to the example of a war film, how like so many people can relate and be moved by these movies despite never experiencing anything even remotely similar to that. I think that is it not almost reductive to go, we can all relate to this, an abstraction of this? Is that not a little bit reductive to the events of the movie? Is there no room for sensitivity in art, though? Is it simply a fact that these emotions are being abstracted, no matter how reductive that might feel? Or is it the least reductive thing in the world to make it abstract? Because once you take that abstraction, that personal thing, and abstract it and make it so many people can relate to it, there's a quality to that makes it almost infinite. It's not reductive at all. It's actually opening the window so much further so many more people can relate and understand that message. Maybe that's it. Maybe the way that art transcends being personal and universal has nothing to do with any of this. Maybe it's just, like I was saying, what songs are catchy on the radio, and the subject matter will always be second. The emotions will always be second to the beat. I think there's a real argument there too. This is where I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. What do you think? What do you think about how art works? Like, do you think that's reductive to look at it this way? Do you think that all art is personal and universal? There's a bug behind the camera right now, and it's buzzing around everywhere, and I think it's a wasp. And I'm way too distracted to even ask more questions. So just let me know what you guys think about this whole thing. This is the painting. Go check out the Oh my God, it's right above me. Go check out the Instagram to see this. It'll be up later this week with the posts of all the paintings and the stuff. Oh my God. Okay, that has a stinger, guys. Why is it so stupid? Why is it knocking into everything? Okay, it's landed. We can finish this. And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Seiss. This has been Paint Talk episode 160. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.